So my son David will tell you that being the kid of a rabbi is the most fun ever. Your mom never wants to violate laws, tries to minimize posting things online, is very conscious that whatever I do or say publicly will be reflected upon me in some way. To a certain extent, living under a microscope, I highly suggest it for all involved. I didn't quite get that memo when I signed up for rabbinical school, what that was really going to look like, more important, feel like, and even more important for the little people in my home. But a sage rabbi, i.e. one of my mentors, shared with me once that even so, don't take them, i.e. the board and the congregants, too seriously, or even yourself. Try to remember to live just a little bit in that process, too. Have a little personality and enjoy life a little bit, even though you're under pressures that, well, aren't always the most fun to be under. And it got me thinking in relation to this week's portion, Ekev, which really should be renamed the portion of consequences, where we're told by Moses that if you pray and you follow God's path, you're going to get some wonderful blessings. But everything we do, in fact, if you really get into it, makes a difference. The question is, a difference to whom and a difference for what? It doesn't necessarily matter. It also got me thinking, since we are headed into Rosh Hashanah, as I see that train barreling quickly at us, are you ready to face the judge who's writing everything down in all of those books of wrong and right? And being in the book of life and the book of death? Do you live by the phrase in Pirkei Avot, Da lifnei ata omed, know before whom you stand? If we were in the sanctuary, I'd have you all look up right now. The eye of God is in our sanctuary looking down on all of us. And I always think of that verse of know before whom you stand whenever I look at that eye. The image in my heart and mind that eye follows us wherever we go. Also, though, in following, still gets me stuck, though, theologically, on the natural consequences. And what are they? Well, for Gersonides, a 14th century rabbi and philosopher, he said that evil that befalls an individual are not a punishment sent by God in the way that a human judge punishes. Rather, they are a natural consequence to our action. Really, what I hear Gersonides saying from the 14th century is there's a consequence to every single thing that you do. Are you ready to live with it? And the answer, I think, to that may be questionable. When I think about, and I did get on Twitter during the DNC convention kind of just to see what people were saying, and I realized that it's just a cesspool out there. I forgot why. I quickly remembered why I stopped using Twitter or X to begin with. I don't know if people really realize that what they're saying is a reflection on who they are. Are they even aware of what they're doing and saying and the consequences that it can have on the person reading it? And it doesn't, and I don't just mean someplace like Twitter, which we all are familiar with. I mean social media in general. The idea that you're supposed to be online and talk to people so that we're not as lonely seems to be a place that makes us even lonelier when we are faced with personas that frankly aren't even us, saying things that are a little bit mean. Again, forgetting the phrase, know before whom you stand. You're just typing out something regardless of the consequence. Sharing something regardless of the consequence. The Reform movement really was challenged with the understanding of divine punishment and reward. And the classical Jewish thought, particularly like I mentioned in the Bible and the Talmud and even in rabbinic literature in the Middle Ages, we see that God is depicted as this judge who looks down and sees all, rewards those who are actually engaged in righteousness, and doles out punishment to the wicked. We live in a cosmic courtroom, or so the rabbis would have us all believe. But the modern Reform view really is not exactly true to that. Solomon B. Freehoff, who was a phenomenal rabbi, he was the rabbi in the synagogue I grew up with, though he had passed, I think, very much before, a few years before I was even born, but was a great ethicist, really reinterprets this concept. Instead of viewing the universe as a courtroom where God directly intervenes to reward or punish individuals, he argued that God sees the world as governed by natural laws, both physical and moral. In this view, the consequences to our actions are more about the natural outcomes in the physical world and the moral order in which we live in, rather than supernatural punishments. Gersonides and Freehoff, I think, would have been best buds, living approximately 1,000 years apart. Rabbi Eugene Borowitz pushed even further when he emphasized that free will is a process which God may guide or inspire individuals toward ethical behavior. We don't need that God in the courtroom looking over us, judging us constantly. Rather, that we look at religion as a guide for us to follow. That this, of course, approach places a significant emphasis on personal responsibility and moral agency of individuals. So, do we actually take personal responsibility? Are we engaged in moral agency of individuals, as individuals, Do we, and maybe I think it's time to bring back the image of the eye watching over us. Maybe if we had that image in our mind, in our soul, in our being, maybe we would be a little nicer to one another. Maybe we would be a little kinder. Maybe it's not the pressure cooker of being under the microscope of being a rabbi that suits you, but maybe just recognize that your actions have impacts beyond you, that what you do and what you say has a consequence. If you take anything away from the sermon, it's go and be nice. Go and be kind. Go and be a good person. Because after all, in just a few more weeks, we will be standing here for Rosh Hashanah, looking at those books of life and death. And I ask you, which will you be written into? And are you sure? After all, remember before whom you stand.